we have a panel now. We're going to ask a really important question about, why Finland. So if I can get Alessia, Yuki, Lasse, and Samuli to come on up. There you go. Oh, you're there. You're there. Yeah, cool. We're all good. So, hey. Hey.
Nice to meet you again.
Yeah. Hey, man. Nice things. You good? Come on in. There should be enough mics through. Oh, sorry. Hello, Oscar. Hello. How you doing, sir? So, we're going to kick off. It's one of those things, as we started off in the beginning of the day, we asked a question about the history of where mobile in particular came from. And it's one thing that struck me continually is the engagement of the Finnish community. I mean, I think in general there's a whole bunch of very interesting things that have happened, and events like Assembly and the demo scene in general. All of these things seem to combine to make the kind of talent we find in Finland, the kind of teams that are creating content in Finland, to be very successful, very interesting, and I'd like to explore that and why that happens and whether that can keep going. So to start that off, let me just get you to introduce yourself, and I think probably just to sort of give you a little bit of background of how you got involved in games here. So, someone, do you want to say who you are and how you got involved in games?
So I started already back in the late 80s in the demo scene, and I always ask, how many people here know what the demo scene is? Raise your hand.
That's cool.
Okay, about half. So I was with the demo group called Future Crew, and then out of Future Crew and some other demo groups back in the day, we decided to create the Assembly Computer Festival. Back then it was just called a demo party. And during those years, we didn't have any game studios in Finland. It was just individual people making games, because back then you were able to make a full game with just one person. It was pretty wild. Well, I still know some people who can make that. But
not many, but some, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So the beginnings of the Finnish game industry all started actually with the demo scene. It was the grassroots sort of skills and efforts and people who decided that, hey, we're going to grow up, we need to find a job, and what if we turn our hobby into our job? I did exactly that myself when I founded Remedy back in '95. I was like, okay, I should maybe look for an actual job, or maybe go to some university or something like that, but I was like, fuck it, I just want to keep doing what I've been doing all the time. So that was the early beginnings for the Finnish game industry. Back then there was only one company before us, and that was Housemarque.
Yeah.
And so we were like 30 guys making games. And early on we started to collaborate, or just go to pubs and share ideas. And the whole thing was after that based on friendship and openness and sharing information. And that's our secret weapon even today.
Oh, I totally agree. Do you want to describe yourself?
Hello, I'm Alessia. And actually, I got into the game industry 2005 when I started at Digital Chocolate as HR assistant, actually. So I was there through 2005 to 2012, and in that time, a big change happened from the legacy mobile when you working with sorry. Yeah, so the game was very different in 2005. And when the iPhone came and Apple, and it all changed. And also the Digital Chocolate, it grew from about 50 people to 160. So we actually like to say that Digital Chocolate is the gaming university of Finland. With a lot of people who have now, like on the second or third or fourth round, they came from D-Chuck. And of course, Ilkka and Mikko were founding the Sumia and D-Chuck.
Yeah.
And we know what came out of that. So, and now I'm working in a small indie company making games.
Cool. Jukka.
Hi, my name is Jukka Hilmonen. I was involved in the game industry back in 2012. Actually, before that, I was for 5 years a university lecturer. But then with my friends, we started the gaming company in 2012, and after that, I've been involved in...
You're the newbie.
Yeah, I'm the newbie.
That's it. Yeah.
Hey, my name is Lasse Seppänen. I've been working on games for almost 20 years now, and my background is pretty similar to what Samuli said here. I think the first home computers had a profound effect on me in the early 1980s. So VIC-20, Commodore 64, Spectrum 48K, those were some of my first computers where I was trying out programming and playing some games. And later came Amiga 500, where I learned assembler. And it was just insane times. I wrote a map editor, for instance, in assembler. Why would you write a map editor in? I have no idea afterwards, but at the time it seemed like a good idea. Anyway, I went to study some stuff, and I think looking back, I was quite fortunate because I was able to study game production and game design already in the 1990s here in Helsinki at the University of Art and Design. I'm pretty sure it was the only place you could do that back in the day when there were under 100 jobs. I mean, now there's like 2,700, so we've grown a lot since those days. But I got my first job in games in 1998, and I was actually hired by my teachers from the university who had their own game company. My first game won a global Nokia award, but you've never heard about it because it was a web game, so nobody ever heard about any web games, really. So that was the first wave of mobile. The second wave of mobile, 2003, 2005 era. We had Java code running on the devices, color screens, awesome times. I was heading a studio with Ilkka Paananen. Later he, of course, founded Supercell. But back in the day, like 12 years ago, we had that studio, we built it up, sold it to Americans in 2004, became part of Digital Chocolate, and I left in 2005 for Remedy. So then I had my opportunity to make a really big game. Executive producer on a $20 million game, Alan Wake, for Xbox. So from the makers of Max Payne. And shipped that in 2010, stayed for a year more, and then thought that now it's a good time to go back to mobile because all the difficult problems are solved. Now we can directly access the consumer. We have good metrics and so on. We don't have to talk to Vodafone and Orange and every single operator in the world.
Well, that idiot at 3, he was terrible.
Yeah. Just the Apple and Google. So it's really great times now.
And I think, so we've got it firmly established, we know that there's some great history, demo scene in particular, and I think, the way Nokia were supporting mobile in the early days, and I think particularly with demo scene, the way that really tapped into the really crude technology that we had in the early Java phone days, because it took that kind of high-level skill to be able to deliver the best experiences you could get. But now we're in a different era. Now, as we've talked earlier, we've moved from a time when mobile was considered a joke, that mobile will never work. No, I remember back in 2004, people were saying to me constantly, "Oh, we don't need a camera on a phone," and then the next thing they said was, "Oh, we don't need a smartphone." Why would we need a smartphone? No, I'll never need a smartphone. It was a constant phrase, and we still get some of that with VR, and we still get some of that with some of the other things. But where I want to take this is, in fact, I saw Mark earlier in the room and we've had this conversation many times about kind of like, no one would need a smartphone. But now we're in a situation where basically smartphones are almost ubiquitous. The games that are available from Finland in particular are dominating the top 10 and have done for years. The number of changes that happen in that top section are relatively stagnant. What space is there left for people to make new content? Is it a stagnating thing, or I don't really believe that, by the way. Is there a ceiling? Is there a ceiling we have to break through, or are we in a mature industry, or is it still growing?
I think the top 20 or top 50 is pretty stagnant, and it's not good for the industry or good for anyone. I don't know how that could be broken. So instead of focusing on the top 50, I always focus on the top 100 or top 200. That already can make you a lot of money. Each day, each slot in the crossing list makes more money than it did yesterday. Exactly. So there is hope.
So you still think it's lasting?
Yeah, I do agree. It's been fairly stagnant. I mean, when was Clash of Clans made? Like 4 or 5 years ago. But on the other hand, there's been every now and then there's been a new hit that breaks through. Pokemon Go, obviously. But there's been other more surprising things like Fallout Shelter, a completely single-player game, came out of nowhere and made more money than the console game and the PC game. And that kind of thing happens. It's still possible, I think, to break through there. But it's a bit like Petri said in the talk before, that you can't really expect to make it. If it happens, it happens. For instance, if you get that virality effect going.
But you need two elements, I think, to break into the very top. And one is innovation and one is like a huge brand. If you have only one of these things, then game over.
But the Fallout Shelter and Pokemon Go are both very good examples, but they didn't seem to me, at least, to come prepared with the game as a service. They've kind of had to bolt that on after the event. Not fair on Niantic, I know, because they do obviously know that about games as a service, they have one, but the degree of success that they had, like, you know, Petri said earlier, was so profoundly out of proportion to their expectations. I mean, who could possibly have predicted that? But I feel like we're in like it's a bit like the Flappy Bird thing, you know, the phenomenons do happen, they bobble up. Are we just praying for a lucky streak, or is there something more profound? I mean, you were talking about, you know, there are more opportunities for new genres and new areas. I mean, should we be differentiating more?
Yeah, that's what we try to do. We don't go to the top. We try to see what kind of niche would be available in the stores and what kind of audiences are maybe underserved. And so we chose, like, we want to do games for women, and especially young women from 13 to 25 year old. And we chose, well, we love clothes. I don't want to say that all girls love clothes, but so we decided to do a dress-up game for 13 to 25 year old girls. I don't think that out of 280 companies in Finland, I don't think that any other does exactly that kind of games. So we just want to be different, and we think that we can succeed with that.
But that's an interesting point. You're focusing on an area which you think is underserved. You're not just trying to focus in, how do I get to that top slot? I was going to you could next, because for you, you're relatively, I mean, you're not new, but you're relatively new to the space in the sense that this is the behaviour that's been in place forever from your games experience point of view. So, you know, what does it look like from your side of the fence when this is just the industry?
Well, I think I agree with what Olesja said, that we also, we Sepia Games are looking for audiences that are under-deserved. And for example, we are making a idle game targeted towards younger female audiences. So it's one of these examples that you just have to be creative and just have to be focused on creating games that are a little bit different than other games, and try to find that sweet spot where you can actually...
But how do you do that? What's the thing that... I can see the drive and the ambition, but how do you realise that ambition?
For us, at least, we are pretty young and unexperienced team, so it just goes by making step by step by step and learning on every step. First launching something, seeing how that goes, collecting feedback, seeing who are players, what they are doing, making the next step, making the next, testing the UA, and for us at least, like, thinking about the UA from the beginning has been a major thing. So we have been able to test the games without spending any money on it. So.
No, my particular view on that is to look at UA as like part of the first-time user experience as well.
Exactly.
So you know, it's why should anyone care enough to get even aware that your game exists, let alone then act upon that to be able to get it, let alone download it, and then let alone choose to carry on playing it after that. I think there's thinking a much longer term is useful. But Lasse, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it is obviously very, very hard to enter a saturated market, and this one seems like a saturated market, but there's two factors. So first of all, predicting entertainment trends is very hard. I mean, there was a time when Western movies were like a huge, huge genre. Where are they now? There's maybe one Tarantino Western.
Hateful Eight.
You know, it's the taste of people. At some point, they get so saturated that they start just ignoring the whole category. I think there has to be disruptions coming up on this market as well. It can't last forever with a few titles or a few types of games. It's just too big that audience for that. Looking at other entertainment, I think that's happened.
Well, I was going to use the example, I forgot who used it yesterday, about how many sweet variety match 3 games are there.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's hundreds and hundreds.
But also, if you look at TV, for instance, in the beginning of TV, it was like you probably thought that it's quite crappy content compared to the movies, but it developed new genres and new types of programming over the years. Like, for instance, reality TV came out of nowhere and became a huge hit. Kind of category of TV programming, rather than a variant of the existing programs that were there already. So I think that's entirely possible. It's just very hard to do, of course. And the way we think about it at PlayRaven, our company is completely focused on positioning our games outside of the so-called red ocean, looking for the blue ocean where nobody is competing at the moment. And there's a way, if you read some literature on marketing, like positioning or differentiate or die, or that kind of books, very classical marketing strategy books about how to enter a very competitive market. There's really good points how to make a method out of it. So I like to think of this a little bit like when Coca-Cola entered the soda market. It was very saturated. It was very hard to get on the tap because there was a limited amount of physical taps in the soda fountain. And you would have lemon soda and strawberry soda and so on. If you just made a 10% better lemon soda, it would be extremely hard for you to break through into that market. But if you made a disruptive product like Coca-Cola did, which had a different taste, also a different functional side to it, so the energizing kick of caffeine, and then nice branding and marketing with the colors and the name and everything, you suddenly can create your own category. If you go to a supermarket now, the supermarket guy will put up a shelf for you for cola drinks, rather than you trying to push your category.
I think Coca-Cola had a small amount of cocaine in it at the time as well, which is another subject.
But my point is, the lemon soda can't really compete directly with Coca-Cola on that shelf, because it's a cola shelf now. They own the category. They created it.
They even own. They give sell the fridges to the stores.
Yeah.
So, it's crazy. But it's a good analogy. Yeah, good for it.
When I talk with developers, and not a day almost goes by when I don't. Most of them are, of course, focused on the mobile games, because that's part of the DNA of Finland. But there are also other platforms. Have you heard of PC? There's
Apparently
VR.
That's a thing. Yeah.
So why focus on the toughest market there is, where it's almost impossible to break through, especially with a team that has no experience doing marketing, for example. UA is extremely difficult to do well, as I'm sure you know. So I always suggest that, okay, if you have a great game, a cool new innovative mechanic, why not just make a premium game for Steam and try it there first?
But even then, something like 2/3 of the games that are on Steam now were released in the last 12, 18 months. So Steam is a market which, although is less competitive, the movement of smaller indies who have tried and failed in mobile to Steam as their focus has itself become, to a certain degree, saturated. And I don't know how many games you've got on Steam. What percentage of Steam games that you own have you played? Anyone above 20%? Really? Okay, I'm impressed. I'm about 20%, and I want to play all of those games. But I mean, this is an interesting problem. And they've got my money, so maybe it doesn't matter. So they've got paid, but is there a kind of a fundamental problem or breakage there? We're chasing new markets, but we actually still have to have the same skill set in terms of marketing our game, albeit via a different store mechanic. So these are the kind of things that go through my head anyway. So, I mean, let's take the conversation a little bit in a different direction. So we clearly have teams that are making mobile games. We now know that, we always knew, but we now have these other kinds of content. In fact, if you think about this kind of scale content that you've done, with Remedy in general, we're talking about every aspect of field, console, PC, Steam, mobile, VR, all of these things are actively being produced in Finland. Have you got the skill base? Have you got the resource base to keep the momentum of that kind of level of innovation? Because it seems to me every generation, every new iteration is requiring more and more skills, more and more resources. Is that going to get to a point where it's going to be difficult?
One of the problems in Finland, since the boom started like 6 years ago, has been people. We don't have enough people coming into the games industry. The school system only produces maybe, 300 graduates every year. And that's actually great, but it should be the double that or even triple. So we have to export most of, the actual senior talent from outside of Finland. In our company alone, we have 11 nationalities in a team of 22 people. So that's pretty crazy, but also I think that's a really great thing. If you are creating global entertainment, then you need to have a international team building that. So,
and hopefully kind of culturally and gender and identity diverse in the process. I think it's something we're not traditionally been particularly good at, but I like to think we're getting somewhere on that. So is that your experience? I mean, are you saying, is it so about having enough resources, or is it about finding the right people around you, maybe on the second or third company round, or what is it in terms of resources and skills for you?
Well, sure. I see very good difficulties in Finland. There's a lot of big companies, well-funded companies. So being a badly funded indie company, it can be problematic to actually attract talent. But still, because the mass is still so big, even if only 300 people are kind of coming into the industry from schools, I don't know how many, but there seems to be a vibrant indie scene where people are doing games just as a hobby and teaching themselves, learning themselves, and that pool creates always possibilities, because when you jump to something to show and to show what you can do, and then you can jump to the bigger companies. But I think there's always needed the step where you can go and do and prove yourself, and then if you have it. So I think that in Finland is good, but because we have the schools, we have the indie scene, and we have well-funded companies, so we have a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. The idea of being, for me, it's a bit like a metaphor for rock bands. You've got to have the guy in the basement learning, till his fingers bleed, and then doing the pub scene, and then getting paid for their first gig, and then becoming a professional musician. It's not just a case of you instantly know what you're doing. I mean, you see a similar resource, Jocko, and you think, is this pipeline working, or would you say that there's still a resource gap?
I think, especially for us, because we are located in Lappeenranta, which is a small city around 3.5 hours from here. The resources is like one of the challenges for us, because we actually don't have the capabilities to hire well-skilled people from abroad, and I don't think that they would even want to come to Lappeenranta, but that's the other story. So we have to find the talent or the like a start of the talent from nearby cities or from Lappeenranta, and then then it's a matter of like how you build a company culture so that the people keep developing themselves and the skills.
Yeah, I think that's a really key thing as well. It's like recognizing that company culture has to be about evolving skills as much as anything else, but that's going to have a beneficial effect on retention of your staff as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's one good thing, that because we are one of 2 companies in Lappeenranta, so the retention of our workforce is quite good.
Yeah.
But of course, it's a little bit more. It takes more time to actually develop the skills which we want to, in order to have the big success.
But I also imagine it would be a bad idea to fall out with anybody. So what are you guys in terms of the skill resource gap?
Well, I think one particular problem is we typically hire people who have about 10 years of experience, and who worked in games 10 years ago in Finland. I mean, not that many people.
Well, they're working for the big boys, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, we have a number of Finns, of course, but the majority of our staff are foreigners that have been imported here. I mean, we have 3 Brazilians, 3 North Americans, and so on. But I think there's a particular skill trap maybe for the Finnish developers here, because we have a long tradition of prototyping really nice, new, innovative game mechanics. I think the game education system right now teaches those skills to people because they are quick to make. You can make quick prototypes and produce a game around that, and you can do that within the scope. Within the scope of a games course. But I am worried about the free-to-play side of things, how to teach that and how to, we have difficulty finding Finnish people who would be proficient in free-to-play specifically. And looking at our own games, we just soft launched our 4th game in June. The new Spymaster is in Android store at the moment. And this one doesn't have any prototyped gameplay. We focus only on the meta game, and you're basically just allocating agents rather than doing tactical things with the agents, as in our previous games where you move some robots or whatever. And this game performs better than the previous one. So I think we've sort of learned how to work ourselves out of the paper bag of prototyping and focusing on the prototyping of that second-to-second gameplay into what really makes a free-to-play game flourish over the longer term. And that's really the meta game side of it.
Yeah, it's the sort of games of a service aspects, which are often, when I often do a lot of the big indie pitch judging and things like that, and often, like you say, there's this amazing mechanic, but no context loop, no reason to keep playing, and no metagame, which I think of as like the stuff that's not pixels. And if you don't break down that service offering properly, you don't have the free-to-play experience.
The school system doesn't actually teach you free-to-play or monetization design yet.
But it's still relatively, the whole free-to-play model is still, let's face it, remarkably new. 2008 really is the point where Western companies were starting to make that happen. And I know that's when we were doing PlayStation Home, and that was when the first of the iPhone store came out, I think only a month before we launched PlayStation Home. And so it's all very early days even then. We're only a few years, not even 10 years into this. I'm not surprised the school system hasn't caught up with that. So let's move it on a little bit further. So the other thing about this, and just this game as a service model, is it's not just about programmers and artists and writers anymore. It's about people who understand, like you say, the marketing aspect, but not just at marketing in the sense of the marketing communications, but actually what I was trained in, the product marketing, the core concept design, to make sure that it addresses an audience and that audience is communicated to and monetized effectively. So what about that skill set? Are there plenty of people in Finland who can do that?
Not really.
Oh, come on. I had to do that.
A couple of years ago, when I was looking at the traditional sort of skill set that you need to create games, which is, of course, game design, programming, art, and production, I was like, okay, there's one thing missing, and that's monetization design.
Yeah.
And that should be like a core skill in the game development team.
Absolutely.
But it's missing.
But as a small team, how do you deal with that?
That's a very interesting question. Actually, during our first iteration, we didn't really understand what we needed. We just core loop and everything, that's it. So we'll do retention later. And then we realized that, oh my God, we actually need to make the retention game and the monetization and all those, like the meta game, that's the main thing. And there are certain conventions. And now we are desperately trying to figure out how to map our economy of our game into the Excel and see, like I was talking with Petri Ikonen from Track 20, and he said, yes, you need to map it into an Excel and see what player, after being in your game 1 year, is the economy still stable? Yeah. If there are not too many money or not too and I was like, oh my God, how do we do that? And even Petri, I was asking who does it? Who is like the guy who does it? And even Petri was saying that sometimes it's a designer and sometimes it's the product manager. And you never know. It depends on the skill set, who happens to maybe have a skill set. So I definitely no, but there's a problem. There's not such.
And the worst thing is that you can screw it up in very basic decisions you make in gameplay.
Yes.
Even a game I'm working on, it's a struggle to get the long-term scale because of the nature of the property that we're making. So yeah,
you'd ask your CFO to do that for you. Actually,
But how many game studios have CFOs? Small indies. And you got a CFO? Anyone? I don't.
Then bring in your accountant or someone who understands numbers and Excels.
Understanding Excel is also that's actually we're going to.
I wanted to comment. I think that's a really good point that you're making. We started our company as a startup at 5 guys in a room, and you just have to make choices. We couldn't have a specialized person for every role, but as soon as we had financing, we knew we have to get also other things than programmers and coders, coders and artists and designers. So, for instance, we imported from Canada a lady who is only focused on economies, and she worked on MMOs before. So those were long-term economies and very careful balancing, and you could test things with the audience and so on. So she knew a lot about that, and she's working on all of our game economies across the teams. The other role that is quite important is data analyst, and that one fortunately we could find in Finland, and I think there's very good potential for data analysts here, but super important. I mean, our game designers go and talk to that guy and ask for specific data on the game, and then he creates that view into the data because nobody else has the understanding on a mathematical level of, for instance, what is statistically significant and what is not.
Precisely.
And the third role I think that is quite vital now that we are in soft launch is the, and especially in global launch, is the consumer support, consumer facing. So when there's feedback, that we respond to that quickly. For instance, the star ratings, if they start to go down because we are not responding, people might put in 1-star reviews. Your featuring with Google will end abruptly if the rating falls below 4 stars. So super vital role that has nothing to do with coding and art.
No, exactly. And it can be solved, well, not solved, but it can help with simple things like having an email address that someone can contact you if they have a problem, rather than just letting them do it on the rating system. So, these are vital things. So clearly, I mean, assuming that most of the English game development team don't move to Finland after Brexit, it sounds like, we've got issues with skill set and resources and training, but doesn't sound like you're in a critical. Are we in a critical problem stage? Is it a disaster about to happen? It sounds like you're kind of okay.
I think we are, and we have been since the very start, being on upward trend with some spikes, with Angry Birds and Supercell. And with success usually comes more success.
Yeah.
Investors get interested in this country. They realize that it's not just a fluke anymore, but there's actually maybe something in the water. And then they start investing.
And that's
more
clearly the way we should carry this conversation on, because you're not lacking in fund systems. You seem to have a lot of backing from government. You have clearly a lot of money in Helsinki for supporting game development.
Not from Helsinki though.
No. But that's
only a handful of Finnish VCs actually invest in games, and usually they want some international VC to come in first and sort of validate it, because they lack the sort of expertise themselves.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because the Finnish VCs sort of burnt themselves with some earlier stages of the game industry, and then they got scared and they just don't want to invest in games on their own.
Well, it's entertainment content, and it's always, like you said earlier, it's massively risky experience. So, what do you do in terms of having enough money to continue making a game? You're sat there, sitting there, making this game. How do you keep going?
We keep going by trying to get funding, as we're always looking for money. We realized that it's we talked with about 20 VCs at I think 15, so it's easy to have contact and to talk, but everybody was, yes, get your numbers in perfect order and we will give you money. Okay, so we need to
be successful first, then you ask for money.
Yes, after you can show that the game is going to succeed, then we will give you the money. So now, but still, there are a lot of angels in Finland, so we are now looking more into the angel investors, and because of the Tekes loan, like this government funding thing, we don't need to have so much money, but so we can actually manage with the angel money. So it's a good ecosystem still. And it's what I can't say enough about Finland is that starting fresh and kind of starting very novice, I have been able to have so much talks with the industry veterans and get so much help, so much introductions, and just everybody's so open, and that's amazing to actually see it.
Let's stick with the. We'll come back. I want to come back to that later, but let's stick with the funding for a moment. Obviously you're not in Helsinki. Is funding a lot harder for you because you're not?
Yeah, I think it's part of the things what we have to focus on. Part of our team is doing work for hire cases just to keep the rest of the team going. But also Tekes has helped us a lot, so it's one point. But now we're looking for a co-development deal for our next game. So of course we are not in a stage that would actually really seriously getting VC funding. So we're looking for a co-development deal just to get the game finished and published through a third-party publisher.
Are they relatively available? Or they exist?
Yeah, I think there's much better reception for the co-development deals than to actually raising some.
It almost makes you wonder if we're kind of sneakily heading into that era of publishing again. Is it different? Is it still different from that?
I think it's a little bit going to that direction, especially for companies like us, where we don't actually have that much experience on running free-to-play games or publishing or marketing those. So we lack the skill set at the moment. So we figured out that it would be better for us to have a publisher who has the same kind of user base what our games are targeted towards.
And I think there's definitely something about this idea of publishers not doing just the marketing anymore, but actually having to do the back end, the customer service management, long tail stuff. But that's probably a debate for another topic. What about funding for you guys? Because you've got the track record, you've got all that experience. It's easy, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I want to say it's easy, but it's you have to build momentum one way or another. If you don't have momentum, then everything's hard. Everything's hard. I mean, recruitment is hard, getting financing is hard. Everything's hard. So I would say it's easier to start building that momentum when you have the credits and when you have done things in the past that were successful. And we haven't been bottlenecked by funding. We've raised about $7.5 million in funding. About maybe 30% of that comes from the government, and the rest is VC and angels. Mainly, so that hasn't really been the bottleneck with us. But I think to build that momentum, sometimes new studios might also not be thinking bold enough. You have to present a bold plan and then go after some particular group of investors who want to pursue a bold plan. Because if you're kind of just a generic game studio, we want to make a game X, and you don't have a bold plan, then it's hard for them to get excited about it. I mean, our strategy is differentiation. We're going to position our games outside of the groups that everybody else has. We were able to find fairly easily a number of investors who were excited about that, and then even, take a pick of the investors.
Fantastic. But what about these guys out here? I don't know how many you got new studios starting out. How did they get there first? Okay, is it still down to friends and family and fools?
I think that's where you start. Yeah, and you usually have to sacrifice your relationships as well. So it's a very lonely and rocky uphill battle kind of road. But how I look at it as an investor, I always look at the team, and I usually want to meet them multiple times over a course of a certain amount of time, let's say half a year or a year. I want to see how they've developed as people and how much more they understand than I previously met with them. Because there's a lot of different skills that you need to have, or at least understand that you need them eventually. If you don't have a full picture of these things, or it's like too incomplete, then you are not ready for the next stage. So I see myself as sort of like an unofficial gatekeeper to the next level, because the actual investment that we make is very small. But of course, if you couple that with Tekes and you are just a very small team, you can get some runway, a few months at least. But the biggest thing is that we validate you, and then we introduce you to the big boys who are not even in Finland. And then they're like, okay, maybe we should look at this company instead of all of these. They don't have the time to come here and check out every studio, every startup all the time. So they come to us and ask us, what's your recommendation, Samuli?
So it's about bubbling up the kind of cream so that we can just focus on that part of it. I mean, I think that's, and again, it taps into what you were saying about this evolutionary process, this flow.
We started out, we didn't know what we don't know. Now we are on the stage that we know what we don't know, and we need to learn. So we're going on steps and finding for people in Finland who believe in us and who could validate that yes, this team has ability to learn, to develop their games, and we believe in them. And after that, go forward.
I mean, is that maybe the Finnish secret in some ways is that you're actually
Finnish
willing to learn?
It's sisu, because it's the ultimate form of perseverance.
Yeah.
When I meet with these wannabe entrepreneurs, they need to go through that painful experience, because if they don't have sisu, they will quit.
Yeah, and you need sisu almost every day, because always, well, shit hits the fan every freaking day, so you really need the sisu thing. And probably like you see, some people, they give up, but if you don't give up, you're just pursuing your dream. Eventually, something will come out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And Lasse, you were going to say something there.
Yeah. Also, I think it's a bold plan to found a company straight out of your game education, for instance. But it's also a great idea to get a job in an established games company, spend a year or two there, and then try to establish your own. Because then you have some credits. You have built a little bit of that momentum that I was speaking about. If you get any job at Supercell, think about it. If you get any job like customer support even or something, you can put that Supercell name and you can tell about your learnings at Supercell and whatever when you are founding your own thing. But if you have nothing, if you have just, let's say, education or just bedroom coder, you gotta have really, really cool demo or something.
Because I think this is a really big, deep topic in its own right, and probably shouldn't cover it, but let's do it anyway. This idea of coming out of university and thinking that you can know how to make a game. Not just make it, because you can technically make a game. I'm not saying you can't actually make something that's playable, but making a business out of a game is a completely different thing. And understanding the difference, and I think, like I said, not knowing the unknowns. There's a psychological factor called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is exactly that. You're not competent enough to know that you're incompetent.
In my experience, the best entrepreneurs are the ones who always wanted to be entrepreneurs. They might have been at a real job at some point, but if you are at some bigger company, you're like protected from the harsh realities of the actual business world. So it's much better that you do it yourself from the get-go if that's what you want to do. So you sort of level up your skills gradually.
Yeah, and I actually agree with that. I'm just thinking it's an interesting dilemma, isn't it? Because we're kind of saying two what sound like opposite things. Go get a job after college to learn how to play a game, and go make a company to learn how to make companies. And they're both. You need both. You need to find some method to at least find the best way to learn. So, why shouldn't these guys go and work with Supercell? Why should they bother with the pain, the stress, the nightmares, the lack of sleep, where's my mortgage?
You have to be pretty crazy to be an entrepreneur.
So why should they make
it? It has to come from your DNA.
Yeah, but why? Why would you do it? Why is it worthwhile doing?
You love it. You do what you love, even if it's really, really hard.
So it's all about what you love at the end of the day.
Two kinds of people. There are people who are the workers, and then there are the entrepreneurs. And you know it's in your hearts, like which one you are. And when you just can't be happy working anywhere. So I think it's in your DNA, and you don't choose it.
I've only once applied for a job. That was towards Nokia, and they never even answered back to my application. And then I founded a company that actually sold millions worth of software to Nokia.
Yeah. No.
And I always went back at my Nokia meetings and I told them about my experience of trying to get a job there.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm going to Jukka, is this your experience? Is it because you were at college, university before?
Yeah.
Now you're an entrepreneur. What made you make that transition?
I think it was partly because the cultural atmosphere in the university, it was totally there was no actual development. People will like trying to learn or memorize some knowledge to their heads, but they're not actually using it. So that was very frustrating for me. And when I had this bunch of friends who we started the gaming company with, it was like a total transformation for me and new kind of experience. Because I actually got and did something with my knowledge and not just trying to memorize it by.
It sounds like you kind of discovered the entrepreneur within. Is that fair?
I think the entrepreneurship chose me and not
you.
Yeah, not the vice versa.
I mean, that's an interesting way. Because I think there's a lot of people like that. I mean, I think I'm probably of the kind of always had the entrepreneur in there anyway. But I know a lot of people who just were frustrated in the way other people were doing that work, and they realised the only way they could do it better was to do it themselves. And I wonder if that's the kind of glue that makes that work.
I have met multiple people who were sort of dormant entrepreneurs, and I'm trying to sort of detect these people and sort of encourage them to try their own wings. And then when they actually do it, they are usually super happy, even if it's really hard to do it. But they're like, okay, I'm alive again.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I totally buy that. I was a dormant, and I've been happier and learned more about myself as a person and also about the world in last year being a game company entrepreneur.
So
I'm a bit late bloomer on this.
So Lasse, what about yourself? I mean, with this context, I mean, is there a good reason to be an entrepreneur other than being a slightly bit of crazy?
I think there's a lot of truth in what Samuli said about being an entrepreneur at heart. Some may be dormant, but it's still something you have in your heart. I mean, I set up my first games company in 1996, I think, when I was still a student, and that just didn't go anywhere because we had crazy plans. We didn't understand the business, but we were just coding a lot and making a lot of assets for a game and so on. And then I got that first job, and I realized a lot of the business side of things, and I was able to make a lot of mistakes on somebody else's dime, basically. Yeah. That was the opportunity I had. But I still had that in my heart, that I want to set up my own thing. So I was there, I was learning, I had a plan going forward, and then I set up my own thing a few years later, and it can be part of the plan to go and work somewhere. I think a great example.
Risk management.
Actually, Joachim Akren is a great example. He's a die-hard entrepreneur. I don't think he's in the audience right now, but he's a die-hard entrepreneur as far as I've known him. He went to Supercell for a while. He was the chief analyst or something like that. And then he went and founded Next Games, which is now a big company with Walking Dead and so on. So I think that's also a good example of, you build some momentum, you build some skills, and make some errors with somebody else's money. Go do your own thing.
But the money is very seductive. I mean, I made my first pitch for a game when I was 18, a small company. We called ourselves Ancient Software, went to Firebird, gave our pitch. They said, that sounds great, go build it. We hadn't got any money, so we couldn't go build it. I had to pay our rent. So I got the marketing job, because that was easy. And it's funny how it's so easy to get trapped by the fact that you're being paid, and it does submerge that entrepreneurial time bomb. But at some point, that's going to come out and get you. Okay, let's wrap up now. I just want to sort of focus again back on that thing you said earlier on, this whole thing about the culture here, where something you were talking about as well. The openness and the communication that happens in Finland between game developers, that they share lessons.
Intimacy is the right word.
And I think, how did that happen? Why does that happen? Is it because of the legacy of the demo scene and assembly, or is it a wider reason?
It's always been part of this thing. And it's pretty unique. I've not discovered this in other countries, actually. No, I mean, when people hear about it, they're like, okay, yeah, you're just saying that it can't really be like that. And when they actually come here, they're like, what? You actually share information? Aren't you competitors? We're like, fuck no.
Absolutely.
I mean, if 20 people share everything they know, then everybody will be much richer. You give one thing and you get 19 things back. Precisely. I think that math is just like a no-brainer. Everybody should do it, everywhere.
As a contrast, in the UK, this does happen sometimes, but tends to happen on a kind of like local level. So, the guys in Leamington has a shared working space called Arch Creatives, and they've done amazing stuff by getting lots of people talking. But a lot of those guys all used to work together at Blitz and Codemasters, so they all knew each other already, and therefore that trust could happen. But I mean, is that intimacy comes presumably from so many of you all working in the same companies at different times. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, once I made this exercise where I mapped out which sort of entrepreneurs came from which companies, and it's like a web. Everything is connected to everything. And at these monthly gatherings, there's usually hundreds of people there. And it's not just in Helsinki, but in all the other major game hubs in Finland, where we have these same events. And people from other cities going to these other events and talk and connect and network and all that.
So what's your experience of that?
And it's not just the big boys talking with each other. Any newcomer can come to and ask and be get help anytime. I've been totally amazed and blown away by where people if I asked yes, I have problem, can we talk, can I offer you a lunch, and can I talk to you about my game, and can you help me, what should I do next, can you tell me what I don't know, and I've been always answered, and I have always had these lunch dates, so I definitely buy it. It works.
And what about in
I think Finnish people see that it's the sharing lessons and sharing information. This is not a zero-sum game. So when we help each other, we actually help ourselves as well as a community of game developers in Finland. So I think it's not a way from anyone else or from me if I share my information which I've learned or whatever. So it's not the way from me when we share things.
I think also from a business perspective, it's kind of a risk-reward equation. I mean, what can they really do with that information if I talk about how a particular metric in our game is doing? What are they actually going to do about that versus the feedback I'm getting is so valuable because then I can compare. They tell me what their game is doing, and I have a benchmark then that I can cross-reference to. And if I talk to multiple people, I have multiple benchmarks. It's great information, very important for us.
So I think with the most sensitive information, we have this, I would call, a gentleman's NDA in place. You just don't misuse the information. Because if people start doing that, those who do it, they will quickly be cast out. So nobody wants to take that risk.
Why would you do that? And at the end of the day, no one's going to take the game idea or the thing that you want to do and implement it in exactly the same way.
Never seen that happen in 21 years. No. Never, ever.
So unfortunately, we have to call it a close there. One last question I'm going to ask the audience before we move on to the next speaker. How many of you are attending these gatherings and meetups? Who are out there are networking and taking advantage of the expertise of these guys? Well, too few hands. Reach out, find these people, talk to these guys, talk to them. They're incredibly generous with their time, incredibly generous with their insights, and I'd like to thank you all for joining the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.